Hi, I'm Basler, and I'm in Houston, Texas, and I want to talk about tree preservation. Those of you who watch my videos know that I've talked about tree preservation a lot. I'm often complaining that people call me after the damage has been done in the middle of the project. Here is a nice case in which the new property owner wants to preserve these trees, and we are months out. Pen has not even been put to paper yet. So let's take a look. They're gonna take possession of the home in a few months, tear it down, and build a new one. The sellers still live there, or leasing it back from the buyers. So we're way early in the planning stages. No architect has been met with yet. And this is what I advise. Speak to your arborist before anything else. When I speak about tree-centered design, I'm talking about get a piece of paper out, draw a big circle around the trees at the drip line, and ask yourself, how is my plan for this property going to impact these trees, and what can I do to mitigate any stress, damage, or losses that are going to be caused when I do this. Every single aspect. Let me put the house behind me, the live oak, this magnolia, Texas mountain laurel, a nice rare treat for Houston, pretty common in Austin and San Antonio and other parts of Texas, but it's not something I see every day. Sycamore tree. Okay, so this beautiful house is coming down and a new one is coming in. That's a trend, as you can see. In this and many other neighborhoods in the Houston area. There's a big old monster coming in over here. So purchasing a house, tearing it down, and building a big one in its place is a very popular thing to do here in Houston. Homeowners want to preserve this tree. My first observation about this tree is that I would maybe give it an 80% if I'm judging it by leaf population. It's a live oak. Live oaks should be so dense that you have a hard time seeing any blue sky through them, or in today's case, gray sky. Houston might get some rain. It's driest 6 months in the history of Houston, or at least recorded history. One of the first things the new homeowner said was, I like my trees like this. And I said, well, then you got the wrong tree. First thing she said was, I want the interior cleaned out, and I want this limb removed and this limb removed. And I said, you got the wrong tree, guy. So I've gone into why we don't gut out the interior in other videos. So I won't get into it now, but I do want to point out, why would I not remove this branch and this branch? Well, a live oak's habit is to be wider than it is tall. And this tree, while it's not very big, is a mature specimen. It is already wider than tall. Let's look at it from a distance. Right? Already goes from here across to here, and it's not quite that tall. So we can't force it to be something it's not. You want a tall shade tree? Plant a sycamore or a water oak, right? Live oaks are suitable specimens to cast shade over a one-story house, but if you've got a fairly small front yard and you intend to build a two-story house, which is the plan for this site, then a live oak is not the most suitable specimen choice. So let's do what we can with what we've got. That doesn't mean we're going to give this nice tree a death sentence. And just compare it to my foot here. This ain't that big of a tree, but it's a nice mature tree, and it's got a beautiful shape for a live oak. Purple forest pansy, a purple shade-loving variety of Cercis canadensis, redbud. So they have permission from whatever authority it is from whom they need to seek permission to build all the way out to here, right? And I said, I strongly advise you against building any farther out than the existing structure. Okay? Because even then, we're going to have to prune to provide clearance to the new building. We're going to have to come back. It extends beyond this roof line 3 feet, another 3 feet, 4 feet, 7 feet, pruning back here. That's assuming we can find suitable laterals back to which to cut. That, and then this branch here might need to come out necessarily unless we can find something to cut back to. There's a lot of sucker growth, which is indicative of previous interior gutting or lion's tail pruning. Remember what I've said in previous videos is that lion's tail pruning, besides all the other stuff that is bad about it, leaves you no options for clearance. You got to have some kind of viable lateral, a branch whose diameter is at least 1/3 the diameter of the cut you're going to make on the branch, so you've got something to cut back to. If you've got nothing to cut back to, you reduce the removing all the way to the trunk. And we're talking about a percentage, a double-digit percentage, maybe 10% of the total leaf population of the tree. Let me come back here and stand here. And so the tree overextends the roof by 3 feet already. And remember, this is going to be a 2-story house. I haven't talked about protecting this tree during demolition. I'm just talking about, think in terms of percentages of the tree's food-making factory that you're removing to accommodate this new structure and that you're going to need to maintain. So this tree's always going to have to be maintained all the way back here. And then we're going to have to do this stuff here. And then they're probably going to do some crown raising. I also predict that they might end up finding somebody else to give them what they want, because I don't think they're going to be satisfied with my minimalist approach to this tree. We'll see. Okay, the tree protection zone needs to be established now, because they plan in just a couple of months to come in and demolish this house, start gutting it, taking out those perfectly good reusable doors and windows, and this house is filled with updates. I mean, filled with updates. I was inside it earlier. Premature defoliation is a fancy term for leaves falling out of a tree any time earlier than what is natural. In the case of this live oak, late February, early March. In the case of the sycamore, fall. So premature defoliation is the phenomenon whereby trees lose percentages of their food-making factory prior to what is natural for them to do so. That is caused by stress. It can be caused by drought. It can be caused by overwatering. It can be caused by disease, root rot, caterpillars, aphids, scale, sucking insects, chewing insects, rasping, lapping insects, over pruning. Over pruning can stress out a tree and cause it to do a leaf dump. It's almost counterintuitive. Why would taking too much out of a tree cause it to defoliate prematurely? Well, why indeed? I'm not sure that we fully understand that, least of all me. But it's a phenomenon that occurs, and it's actually quite common. Mite damage. So, decades of turfgrass competition. Irrigation systems. These are all the things that are present, and we haven't even started demolition yet. So we put in a protective fence around this tree. I strongly recommend a root invigoration procedure. I talk about that extensively in my videos. I won't go into it now, but minimum of 8 radial feet. They're probably going to want to put in a trench and a root barrier. There are a lot of surface roots here, and I've shown you in other videos where when I see a lot of surface roots, I stick a soil probe in the ground and I see 2 inches of topsoil and clay, compacted clay underneath that, which solves the riddle. Not that I'm suggesting it was a riddle. This is the root system of the sycamore. They're probably going to put in a root barrier here too. Again, they're going to demolish this and probably be a little farther out. They want as much big of a footprint as they can, big of a house as possible without being a detriment to the tree. So here I was pretty adamant about making sure they maintain this. Root protection zone, root invigoration, fertilization. So root invigoration increases the organic content of the soil, increases the soil quality. Fertilization provides necessary roots. So root invigoration is the lifestyle change to manage the stress to make the headaches go away. Fertilization is the aspirin to make the headache go away today. So those two things need to be managed, but one is a band-aid and one is a cure. You know, one is a lifestyle change. So now we've got the backyard. And remember, all of this house is coming down, including this garage. Okay. This live oak, this is the real keeper. This is a granddaddy. Okay. Again, probably no older than the house. Let's say the house is 40 years old. I would guess the tree is 40 years old too. Doesn't have a huge girth from a trunk diameter standpoint, but it's a nice tree. I would give it a better score on my score sheet, if judging from leaf population, than I do the other tree. But we must remember that this is now going to be 2 stories. So I said, yes, Mr. and Mrs. new homeowner, with grand plans for this new property. You love this tree. You've always dreamed of having a tree in the courtyard of your home. Now I want you to visualize it without this branch and without that branch. Previous lion's tail pruning having been done, removing this limb and this limb and this limb, reducing our choices of what to cut back to. So if this house is going to be 2 stories tall, what do we cut back to? We have one choice, all the way back to the trunk. Now we have to visualize this tree with that huge piece of it missing. There's going to be some pruning back here to accommodate the new garage, which I hope is going to be 1 story without a mother-in-law or guest house above it. Look at this. Okay, we've already left, and the backyard is so this is the hardscape. That's going to be pulled up. No matter how careful they are pulling up this hardscape, it's going to be stressful to this tree. This raised bed is going to need to be worked on with, you know, root surgeon technicians. I don't know. I'm wondering if it's the dog, but there's some weird. I was looking at it real closely earlier. Some strange, fairly recent disturbance to the bark. Anyway, what I was saying was a tree protection zone needs to be established for this tree too. This pool's coming out and a much smaller pool coming in. Count on that being 2 stories too. This water oak is going to be cut down. That's going to be 2 stories. This is just the breezeway between the house and the garage. That's going to come down. Whether or not it's rebuilt remains to be seen. Once this hardscape is pulled up, I want to get in here and fertilize and do a root invigoration procedure. I'd like to do 8 radial feet around the trunk of this tree. Establish the fence, and in addition to fertilizing and root invigoration and protective fencing and trying to prune it as judiciously as possible and accounting for the new 2-story structure, I want to point out that you get a dog pile effect of various pests and diseases that will contribute to the aforementioned premature defoliation. And we want to account for that too. I'm a strong believer in treating for root rot when there is root disturbance. If we're going to be trenching and installing a root barrier, we're going to be cutting roots as well as pruning foliage. Those of you who are old school tree guys or might be inclined to say, well, that's fine, you know, you compensate for the loss of one by pruning the other. That's utter nonsense. Simple principle of supply and demand leaves demand nutrients and water from the root system, and so, you know, cutting one to compensate for the loss of another just doesn't make sense. Not from the perspective of tree physiology. So account for premature defoliation, account for an uptick of pests and diseases that cause leaf damage and cause premature defoliation. Account for an increased risk of infection to the root system by the many weak pathogens that reside in the soil, just looking for an opportunity to get a finger in the dike, so to speak, of a newly distressed root system. Minimize your pruning, establish your tree preservation zone, conduct root invigoration, conduct soil testing, and tiptoe around these trees. Info at Wide World of Trees. Thank you for tuning in.